Welcome to the Protector Culture Podcast with Jimmy Graham. Jimmy is a veteran U.S. Navy SEAL, a former protective officer for the CIA Global Response Staff, founder and CEO of the Able Shepherd Program, a husband and father of 4, and a personal friend of mine. Now here's Jimmy.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Protector Culture Podcast with Jimmy Graham. I'm your host, Jimmy Graham. This episode is going to be brought to us by Able Nation. That's able-nation.org. That's Neil Pinkham founds that organization. I'm a co-founder. I'm also on the board. What we do is we raise money for folks that don't have a budget, primarily churches and schools, to take care of their security needs. So if they don't have a budget for that, we step in, donate med kits, security training, and products. So check them out on able-nation.org. Appreciate it. Today's a special day. We've got a new friend, Mike Glover with the American Contingency. I'm going to BK, which you guys all know and love, that runs the podcast, reached out to Mike and his assistant. They agreed to come on and talk about the similarities between what we do for a living and then also the things we've each been called to do. Obviously, us local in the South Denver area. Mike's been more of a national reach. So before we came on air, I already thanked him, Veterans Day, told him Happy Veterans Day. And I really appreciate that more vets. I said on Veterans Day, I think the number's 22 per day vets commit suicide. And I really hope and pray, like my prayer is that vets will find their leadership role again, locally, nationally, whatever. And just to have, the joy that I get out of this community here locally is unbelievable. I'm sure Mike's the same. So I just pray they'll find their mission again and just engage, because we desperately need that kind of leadership. So BK, I'm going to let you take it, brother. You primed us and we're ready to go. So let's do this. All
right, let's put the wheels on the ground. So a little bit of background here. I'm a huge fan. I follow both Mike and Jimmy on podcast, obviously trained with Jimmy. We're very lucky to have Mike joining us today. And what I'm going to do is just throw out a couple questions. Maybe we bounce back and forth like a tennis match. Starting with Mike, can you give us the quick, 30-second rundown, your military career, your transition into the CEO of a very large training organization, kind of bring the audience up to speed of where you're at there?
Yeah, sure. I started off in the infantry as a 17-year-old infantryman. Did 4 years in the infantry pre 9/11, and then the rest of my time was spent as a Green Beret in special operations. I mean, I've been in a lot of duties and roles. I won't bore you to death with that, but I was a sniper, team sergeant, sergeant major, JTAC. I've done a lot of things in Special Operations Command. I did 9 trips to war, and then migrated into a contracting capacity with the Central Intelligence Agency. Did that for a couple of years, and then realized I wanted to start a business. And so I started a business with the idea of taking kind of the experiences I had and the processes I had and creating solutions for civilians. And so I started a company called Fieldcraft Survival, which I started 5 years ago in a shipping container in Pakistan. And then migrated Fieldcraft from a training company, not just focused on tactics, but a survival preparedness company focused on everything in preparedness. We teach mindset. We do classes on first aid and trauma, obviously the tactical classes, mobility classes. This weekend, I have a course on horsemanship and packing a horse for mobility, because, I mean, if everything falls apart, you'll still have a horse. But we do a lot in this space. We got a podcast. And then I started a movement recently called American Contingency, which, thank you, Jimmy. It is at a national level of where we're communicating how important preparedness is to individual people and families and communities. So that's my background.
That's awesome. Really appreciate that. Jimmy, you want to bring Mike's audience, if you will, up to speed on your background? And
I get what you're saying, BK. That is eerie. Basically what he said, but Navy. No, I was SEAL teams for about 15 years, a little over 8 years active duty. I stayed reserves for another 7, and then worked with the agency. Was a lead instructor and deployed for 6 years. And then deployed straight on a cycle for the 7th year. Was in Benghazi, wasn't there for the attack. Let me be very clear about that. That was my team, in Benghazi during the 13 hours and all that kind of stuff. Was a sniper, was a JTAC, was drawn to the horsemanship thing. That's really got my attention, brother, because I did a course out here in Colorado before. I lived out in Virginia, then in Montana, then came down here. But while I was living in Virginia, and the agency was using, horses and mule trains and all that stuff, I came out here to COAGS, Colorado Outdoor Adventure Guide School. Always been drawn to the West, always been drawn to those kind of things. It was awesome, but I don't feel, I'm not comfortable enough to teach that kind of stuff. So I would love to look into more of your stuff like that. Maybe, I don't know if you travel or not, but have my guys go through that because they've asked about it. They would love it.
Yeah, that'd be super cool, man. You mentioned Benghazi. I actually deployed to Benghazi from October of 12 to March of 13, and was the team lead for all special operations guy on the ground. So 2 of the unit guys that were there, and I had 3 of my SIF guys that were there.
Wow.
The major program to actually go after, I can say the name now because he was rolled up, Abu Ghatala, who was responsible for that attack. So there's some cool parallels. One of the guys that was there, I won't say his call sign over the net, but he was probably one of your guys. And he recruited me for that job. And that was probably the agency cutting me off. They're like,
right.
But I did that job, that same exact job as a direct for a couple of years because of that interaction I had on the ground in Libya, and because of Benghazi. So it's kind of crazy.
Wow. Small world.
Yeah.
So Jimmy, for comparison, when were you in country or whatever? Did the times overlap or?
That would have been, 2012, I did 3 tours out there, 2 months each, came home, but the attack happened between my second and third. So I did a turnover. There was a staff transfer, so I was the team lead in Benghazi right before I left, 3 weeks prior to the attack. Came back probably a month and a half after the attack to Tripoli, and then did a day trip over to back into Benghazi, but we didn't stay. Obviously, we didn't have a place to sleep.
Yeah, I remember that day trip. It was tied to SSE, and I remember that day trip, and you probably might even recognize my face or my guys. I mean,
Wow.
I was over. We were co-located with the embassy, but I was over at you guys' compound every single day almost. But the two guys that you guys had from USASOC, those are real good buddies of mine, and I worked with them the rest of that trip until they changed out with new guys.
Yeah, great guys. I know those guys.
Yeah. Really cool.
Awesome. And then I've left this off. We've locally started Stand in the Gap initiative, and that is that's we say to it's readiness, capability, and organization. So being able to get people ready, preparedness. Obviously, some people like to have different. We say the root cellar mentality. Having things on hand and all that. Don Jones came on and did 13, 14 weeks of a Zoom call preparing people. My fear was that I might have this with all these. We've got about over almost 300 members. Ours is more of a subscription-based training program. Much like you said, what in our backgrounds could basically be scaled for every person on the planet? Basically, you're a mother, you're a father, you're an uncle or whatever. What are the, can we efficiently train and get to a standard that is going to prepare us to defend our loved ones? That's what we've been doing for the past 9 years. I started actually before Benghazi, launched a company called Duty to Act LLC that basically turned into Able Shepherd as a trade name. So Able Shepherd is the training branch of it. But the fact that I have all this stuff and my friends don't, like meaning civilians that are around me that I would trust with my family, and they don't know what they're doing. And if they don't, it's my fault because I know, and people in our peer group don't train civilians. I think they're missing the best part because the community that we've formed is just unbelievable. Like I said, I get more out of this than anybody. Everybody's like, oh, thanks for doing this. I'm like, brother, I get more out of this than anybody. I guarantee it. And I get to do what I love doing and raise my family. So Stand the Gap Initiative, we've so far done 5 separate speaking locations, trying to unite. That's all been in churches to unite people. And then we go out and start these smaller groups. We call them 2 and 10 circles, like the 2 people that could be at your house in 2 minutes, 10 people that could be at your house in 10 minutes. Get those, start there, and then start having dinner and grilling and start talking about, hey, this person's a doctor. This person knows how to handle themselves with a firearm, and then co-train each other. So I'm not going to go run these because I get run too thin. So I'm like, you guys start it and we'll support you. So we do have some bigger trainings they can all come to and learn some skills, but we want them to go out there and just start spreading throughout those local communities just in case.
Yeah, and one thing I've seen there from, I think, one of Mike's podcasts, I can't remember which channel, was when you moved your headquarters building, I felt like that community outreach development, come over, have some coffee, see what we do, starting to integrate into the community.
Yeah, I think that's important. I mean, I've always been a big advocate for that because of my special operations background and operating immersed in culture. I mean, when I first infilled into Afghanistan in a remote fire base, I mean, we didn't have a large footprint of American forces. And so often we were breaking bread with Afghans and building rapport with even Afghan leadership within the towns to be able to influence and affect that area. So it's important, not only in a business protocol, but more in a community sense, to have those relationships mended and built at a local level. I think what Jimmy said about his organization is important to highlight, because so many people want to do these kind of things, which is empower their communities or empower people through their experiences, but often it's not executable, and it's not very realistic in its execution over time. So they can't sustain it. When you empower people to stand up on their own in their own communities, and you give them guidance and outline, you're allowing them to thrive on their own, empowering individual communities and having a broader effect. And I honestly think that's the way the American dream was laid out, which is limited role of government, but providing the guidance, including the security that's going to allow you to thrive. And then you go out and do it. I mean, that model is a very good model to apply to any form of preparedness, survival, protection, whatever you might want to do. But that's exactly what we do, is decentralized building of communities and rapport. But it starts with your local community.
Absolutely.
Very well said. And one commonality I'm seeing between the Stand in the Gap initiative and American Contingency is what I would term unbiased communication. I think we've lived through an unfortunate time with censorship in one shape or form, whether it be Twitter or YouTube or, Mike, I think I heard you say Shopify got shut down for no apparent reason. What is it both of you are doing to find the intel and share the unbiased information with your communities?
We planned on, because I might have been, Mike, I've heard of people getting censored in this industry or that are stepping out in a leadership role. So we kind of built that in mind, saying, hit the newsletter. That way it's almost like when you call someplace, say, if we get disconnected, give me your phone number, I'll call you back. So we set up the email and say, give us that, and then go like the Facebook and all that other stuff. Because if they shut that down, you'll still get our emails. Give us a chance to get our feedback under us and then do it. We haven't yet. We did early on as a business, but as Stand in the Gap, we haven't been shut down yet for spreading intel and doing all that and doing our local stuff. Because, it's been open source stuff that we've just been sharing, locally. So we haven't really had a big enough footprint, I don't think, to get their attention yet. But if they do, then we would default back on the emails.
Yeah, similar in circumstance. We've been getting suppressed. I think our situation, we've been getting suppressed on a massive scale, including Shopify. I mean, we gross millions of dollars to an e-commerce platform, and they just shut us down after years of working with them for no apparent reason. I'm actually suing them, so we're going through a legal process. But that was American Contingency shut down on Instagram, deleted, banned, Facebook, Discord. Every single account affiliated with Discord was shut down. Even if you're a personal account affiliated with Discord as a group account, you were shut down and deleted with no reason. And they gave the blanketed statement and reason. I think a lot of this has to do with the rolling up of a lot of right-wing extreme groups that are doing specific things, including telling their guys to come out with guns and protect and defend. Like, I don't have any, like, I don't know that world because I'm not right fringe. I'm not right wing. I don't really follow suit in any way in emulation because I don't like doing that in the first place. If I'm going to start an initiative, it's based off of my own passions, incentives, and desires. So I'm moving forward in one direction, not really paying attention to what everybody else is doing. But we've been rolled up in the same sentence as like Proud Boys, which is crazy because it's not like we're doing classified meetings behind firewalls. We have been open and transparent from the very beginning, which is our organization stands for educating and empowering people to be better prepared. And that's it. Anything. So I think it's important in intelligence and information to be unbiased and to provide the force protection information that's going to allow people to make better decisions in their everyday life. Because if the national media or your local media is biased because of political affiliation or whatever their incentives are, and they're not reporting it, it's problematic because you could be the guy in Provo who drives to work because nobody told him there was going to be a protest. He runs into a protest, tries to get away from a bad circumstance and gets shot for it. And luckily not killed, but he gets shot for it. So we actually have a volunteer group of about 20 plus analysts who look at geographical intelligence and then provide that back to the mother station who disseminates that geographically. So if you live in the Northeast and you're in the Northeast region, you're getting things that are pertinent and objective in news and information in your own backyard. Now, we are very good at pushing that, but we also have been limited. And like Jimmy's contingency plan of migrating to newsletters, we have depended on Locals, the application. It's called Locals, which is unbiased, unmoderated, and uncensored, but also secure, and a newsletter email as a backup and default. We do actually the combination of both of those.
And Jimmy, how are you handling it on your side with Stand in the Gap? I'm thinking of Skip, more on the Intel side, and the newsletter.
Yeah, same thing, newsletter. Like I said, we haven't been shut down right now, but we're definitely eyes on finding a platform as we see more and more people in this industry, or like I said, taking a leadership role. What happens then? I definitely don't think that, Facebook or LinkedIn or Twitter or any of that has our back. So we're going to see where this goes, obviously, but we're definitely looking at other options.
And
that may be a good answer.
Yeah, that got me thinking, see where this goes, because, as of the date of this recording, the elections are behind us. Maybe they're being contested. From what I call a professional or an expert's opinion, you guys have been overseas. You've been in the worst of the worst. Where are we at? Where are we going? What is your interpretation of today's environment?
You want to take that one, Mike? I'll follow up.
That's a good one. And I think, look, there's a perception that's often based off social media, your perception on social media and the actions that you see via your own feed. We already know that social media platforms thrive off of driving emotion. Typically anger is the optimized emotion that is going to allow them to keep continuing to enrage you, to keep you your attention managed and participated on their platform. The problem that I see is largely that we think that in our own backyards, there's people getting punched and beat and there's riots going on in our own backyards. But for most of America, that's not the reality. And I as a sergeant major, even as a special operations guy on the ground, I've dealt with this in how intelligence was reported from our intel guys, where you could create a picture of doom and gloom. And Libya is a perfect example. And in fact, this is great in the context because Jimmy's been to Libya. Before our deployment to Libya, my team knew, in standing up the Commanders and Extremist Force for Africa, my reconnaissance sniper team knew that we were going to be the first on the ground and that we were going to Libya. My 18 Fox, my intel nerd, I put him in charge and said, every week, I want you to give an intel brief of the realities on the ground and the security circumstance so we could be better prepared in hitting the ground. Well, every single week we got briefed. I knew that there were attacks against coalition forces as a whole all over the country of Libya, in Benghazi, and Tripoli, and everywhere in between. And so I understood security-wise that, yes, 99% of your day as a diplomat in Tripoli, when you live in a cubicle and you're not seeing the outside picture, that you wouldn't have a doom and gloom understanding of the world, but there was a security risk to coalition forces coming outside of the wire, for sure. And a potential physical security risk to the people that were in the bases that they were at. So I told my guys to start spinning up to be better prepared for that circumstance. Well, we know this in hindsight, that the State Department never really took any of that serious in how they reported it to headquarters and how it articulated in standard operating procedures and their scheme of maneuver on the ground as a diplomatic service. But everybody who had a tactical sense, including the GRS guys, the special operations guys, and even us who were staged to deploy, we all understood that, except nobody listened to us, right? So what I'm seeing now is there are isolated pockets of violence that are taking place in protests and everything else, and that concerns me. But more importantly, what disconcerts me is the breakdown of society as a whole and the increase of crime taking place in every major metropolitan area. The Denver metro area. I have guys who work for me who are part of Denver Metro SWAT that teach for my training company, and they give me intel updates on the crime and then the escalation they see physically on the ground, and they said it's concerning them because they actually see a physical change every single day they go out to work and deal with these type of instances. Which means if you look at every single place across the U.S., there seems to be a more divisive metric and analytic that you could measure and saying, hey, not only is it perceived, but it actually is a scientifically measurable thing that we are becoming a more volatile country and we need to be paying better attention. Because what I always tell people is like these little instances of violence can scale rapidly with national media controlling the messaging into a larger volatile and violent encounter, meaning like a campaign. One shooting that takes place in Seattle, Washington can be disseminated across the national media, which makes every pocket of violence amplify, which means you have chaos in communities in our own backyards. What does all that mean in a nutshell? That you just need to be better prepared. I don't care if we were talking about peace and tranquility because all the statistics were going down. If you're preparing your life for the worst case in the first place, which I advocate for, then you'll be set up for success in the worst case and everything in between.
Absolutely. BK, there was the last time we were speaking at a church, actually it was 2 times ago, a Denver officer, big old guy, special operations on the cop side, stood up and he goes, I'll be honest with you, things get that bad. He's like, I'm going home. First, I'm going home. And I think if we're honest, everybody would say that. Now, the reason why I wouldn't do that in Benghazi, because I'm in a different country or whatever. So something happens, you're ready to, take care of whatever because you train that way. But if you're being realistic, if I'm right here and right now, you and I, you put me in the retail space, you're over in the classroom. We're in Centennial, Colorado. If something came down the wire and it was doom and gloom like right now, I got to go make sure that Rachel and the kids are okay, period. That's where I'm going. Then I'll go take care of people. So what we've talked about, this is what Mike does for a living. If you take care of that now, if the readiness is taken care of now, I am much quicker at getting out and helping other people. Because, that protector culture, like we talk about in our podcast, if you're that person, you're going to take care of people, but you're not going to pretend you're going to take care of them before your family. I'm going to secure my family, but now we've got planning in place that they're already taken care of. If I can verify that, now me and you can go out and take care of other people. So I absolutely agree that readiness, that we used to have, we joke and say, kid runs over to my ranch and says, Paul needs you. And I rack my 30-30 and say, let's go figure out what's going on. It used to be that way and now it's not. So unfortunately, we're back to it. We were safe for a while. We're getting back to it. Pretty, raw, pretty, primitive, if you will. Okay. That I need you. We didn't need each other. We don't need each other anymore. Or we didn't because we got comfortable. Well, we're back.
Another question I had written down, because both of us, all of us are, let's just say in the Southwest area of the U.S., some of us might be in a more urban setting, say downtown Denver. Some might be more remote, outside the city on some acreage. What recommendation, what tips would you guys have either from a preparation standpoint, materials and supplies to training, since both of you guys own training organizations, the skills that could and should be developed for those differing environments?
we say uniform, safe, and accurate. We made up a standard called USA. Are you uniform, safe, and accurate? Are you uniform, meaning are you on the same page? Again, could I grab a gun and enter a building with Brian Karch, that kind of thing? That's got to be figured out beforehand, because by the time the situation happens, there's no time to train. Are you safe? And we've seen it in our industry. Some people have no business handling a firearm, especially near other people. That's got to be trained. And then accurate. Can you hit anything under pressure? So if you're under pressure, can you absolutely do that? So if we go to do as the Active Shooter Response Training Center, if we go out and do businesses and schools and churches and all that, we always say you start with your people. That means training. Get the plan down, have some kind of trained response. Then let's talk about cameras and security and all that stuff. We say technology exists to make the human response more effective. So it means start with your people, always. So that's my answer. Start with your people, make sure they're uniform on the same page, they're safe, they're going to hurt each other because that's imperative, and that they can actually do something, can actually be effective and be accurate.
Yeah, I'll just frame that. I think that's great advice. And I'll just talk specifically, because as a community and as a larger group of people, I think that's how people should always train. Speaking on individual training and paths, I think it's super important for people to understand that when we're looking at surviving, we're not just talking about self-defense in a gunfight, right? We're not just talking about that worst case people problem, that people catastrophe, that man-made catastrophe. There's a whole bunch of things that happen in every single day life that you need to be prepared for. I mean, 30 to 40,000 people a year die in vehicle accidents. And I often wonder how many people could have saved their own lives if they were better understanding of how this works. When you're faced with an in extremis circumstance, a worst case scenario that hits you in the face like a baseball bat, figuratively or literally, you don't have the time to wait on a first responder to come bail you out. Everything in your behavior, your actions, your responses to stress, your technical skill sets have to be honed to deal with that, because by time it's over, then likely the first responder is coming to clean it up, right? So if you're not prepared in self-defense, if you're not prepared in medical first aid and trauma, if you're not prepared even in situational awareness to avoid and mitigate risk overall, then you're not going to be better prepared. I would encourage every single person who's listening to this to also understand that the tactical industry, which I think we're part of, is a toxic industry because of the relationship of business tied into purpose, where people are trying to affect purpose via their experiences, but also are running a business that monetizes in scale. Well, when you take those two and it's not managed properly, then you look at people cutting each other's throat over profit. If you're a consumer and you're like me, you like options, you like choice. So look at Jimmy, look at his POI, look at his training, look at Fieldcraft survival, look at Mike. Get a myriad of examples. When me and Jimmy were in special operations, we didn't bring in one technical expert that was good at shooting. We brought in every single one that was at the top of the spear, because we wanted exposure to different perspectives, and not only their technical tradecraft, but also their approaches, their methodologies. When you do that and you expose yourself to a lot of training companies, a lot of information, then you can start honing and refining what applies to your particular circumstance in life. And again, rural people in, McLeod, Montana, have a very different look at how they address their preparedness than people in, the Denver metro area, and everything that Jimmy said is spot on. Like it starts with not the technical skill sets of identifying like, hey, how fast can I draw this pistol from the holster? It starts with the broad strokes of how do I plan this? How do I look at it as a task org who's going to be an asset versus a liability? And who am I looking to in a community to help me and assist me in being better prepared?
BK, before your next question, you know me, I kind of wear my faith on my sleeve, and this is just my personal answer, is that I think people are now starting to entertain that a little bit more. When you say foundation and you go back far enough, well, I talk about, what do you stand for? If you figure that out, then you're not really movable. You're like, hey, you're not going to convince me I'm a racist. I know I'm not a racist, and I'm 100% I'm not a racist. Nothing you can say will change that. So, when you say, what can folks do? I think entertaining that, it's like that faith portion for me as a Christian guy. I'm actually having that conversation more than I've ever had. because people are confused and they don't know really what's true. And I'm like, all right, well, let me draw you back to something that I believe to be true. So that should have been my default answer. So I felt bad. So I threw that in there.
Felt compelled. Yeah. Well, it leads in well to what I had written down for kind of my last question in terms of hope. When I look at young people, whether they're just out of high school, maybe they're going into college, and they're considering a military career. Both of you guys, it sounds like, went into the military right out of high school or shortly thereafter. What advice, comments, suggestions would you have either for the enlisted types, or perhaps some that are going off to college, maybe in an ROTC type of program, what they can expect, what they might be looking for, and how it's changed your lives?
Mike, you want to take that one first?
Yeah, sure. I get asked more than anything via influences, hey, how can I join? How can I be a more integral part of special operations and service? Look, it's a very broad spectrum. What I would say is, if you're going to serve your country in any capacity, that's a good thing. And I think service is under communicated and not advocated for enough, especially because your service in the military is definitely selfless in many ways. The gross effects on you as a person and a human being and your family, speaking of faith, will make your faith even stronger, because it takes a lot of strength and faith to get through a military cycle or service in your obligation. I personally have experienced an idea in recruiting in the Army specifically that was this idea of be all you could be, right? And I learned a lot of the virtues and values that I hold near and dear now in my life based on the principles lined out by the Army. So having the opportunity to do anything I wanted to do in the U.S. military and volunteering for multiple things, I thought was a cool opportunity. A poor kid, not really growing up with a lot of opportunity. When you go into service and then you open the door and realize that there's so many things that you can do to benefit you, it's really cool to see. I think, looking back on my service, I did everything I could in every instance I could in trying to accomplish that. But I also think people don't understand what separates people who serve versus people who didn't. So the veteran community is the integration with American citizenry and being exposed to austere environments, like a worldly perspective. So you get to really see what America is all about when you're in the military. Even though I operated in special operations and the infantry, which has a pretty significant and narrow demographic, I interoperated all over the world with different agencies and different people from all walks of life with one common goal and objective, and it was to serve and to protect and defend their country. Being part of that machine in ideology and application was amazing, and giving you better perspective and what to appreciate when you get out of service. And so I had a better understanding of being an entrepreneur, in my case, of how to run a business because of all the things I learned from the military experience. And, it allowed me to gain an appreciation for that worldly perspective. Like, I educate people about culture because a lot of people in America have, living in their bubble, they take all their virtue from what they scroll and click on social media. So they have no clue or idea of what that is. So if we're further broken down from community and churches and schools and friendships and society, then what we do is lean on the access to the information we have, and that's our cell phone. When you're in the military, you get to see different cultures and worlds, which is a pretty amazing perspective in coming back and reintegrating into civilian society. So whether that's made me more empathetic, whether that's made me value more American tradition and the American experience, it has made me who I am today, and I wouldn't take it back for anything.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I grew up in the Navy. You know, it's like I needed structure, I needed discipline, I needed all that. It wasn't as dramatic as you know, military or jail, but it definitely knocked off some probation time. Let's just leave it at that. But it was you know, so when young people, I mentor a lot of young people now that are going into the military, and I absolutely thank them because we need them desperately, but we don't need a bunch of you know, lost people. We need good folks. So they square themselves away. We talk about, like, parents, you know, bringing these people up and then going into a life of service. That honor will be yours forever. If you honorably serve, you know, there's a special thing that happens on Veterans Day, on Memorial Day, on 4th of July. For me, when I see the flag and hear the Star Spangled Banner, it's a special thing that I earned. You know what I mean? And I don't lord it over anybody. You know that, BK. And I'm not a big service guy. Like, oh, this. I know your son's going in the Marine Corps. You know, all these young people that are coming in. It's I absolutely thank them no matter what they're going to do. And as a message of hope, like I said, it's like, in the planning part of it, in the building part of it, whether it's your military service, there's such an honorable thing. In these cultures that we're creating here in small town USA, sometimes the training and the planning is the best part. You learn. We've talked to people, and you know this. I hand them a sheet and say, put on 12 names of your circle, and they don't have one friend. Like one friend, because they were busy. Yeah. They just blinked, got busy, moved states, and they just hang out watching Netflix all night. And you tap them into a mission, and you say, hey, man, we need you here. You've got a skill set because you're, you know, whatever. And even if you don't, let's support something. Let's get behind something. And you see a man come alive. That's what a book, I think it might have been John Eldredge, talking about, you know, don't look for what the world needs, look for what makes you come alive. Because what the world needs is more men and women that have come alive. You know, if you're on fire for something and you're out there doing it. So again, that those veterans refining their new mission. So I think that as soon as, like, the COVID and the election and the blah, fill in the blank, as soon as I looked at that as a challenge, I stopped being freaked out, because I was a little afraid, like, man, this is crazy and whatever. Once I looked at it, I was like, okay, I didn't sign up for an easy tour. Let's do this. Why? Because it's irresponsible to hand my kids this mess. So now it's a challenge, and all of a sudden you got my dander back up, and now it's like, all right, well, let's get to work.
Awesome. Well, goes without saying, you know, thank you guys both for your service. Certainly appreciate it. Thank you for your time today, capturing this podcast, capturing these moments. It's fun. It's exciting sitting here because I watch you guys on YouTube anyway. So now I got to be a part of it. And Mike, I would absolutely extend the invitation. When you're in Denver, please come by. Jimmy's implementation of reality-based training is second to none, and it's an experience. And who knows, maybe we'll be up on those horses one of these days. So I'll turn it over to you guys to close this out in your own way, and I'm going to hand it off.
Mike, you want to go first, then I'll close out and close the podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to say, hey, you know, it's really cool going on podcasts like this, especially, you know, getting to talk to guys like Jimmy who have similar overlaps and experiences and careers and who are doing the same things that we're doing. But to know that there's guys with operational experience and context and better helping their communities thrive and not just survive is really important to me personally. And I want to say I appreciate the invite, and, you know, everything that we're doing with Fieldcraft and American Contingency is really purpose driven. And, you know, I'm a horrible businessman when it comes to specific things like this, because you want to do it for free because of how we operated for free. But yeah, thank you for the opportunity. And I hope to maybe interoperate and do something with you guys down the road. It'd be really cool. We're in Denver often training police officers, and we have a couple instructors there. And it would be my pleasure. Appreciate any opportunity afforded, and would look forward to it.
Awesome. Appreciate you, brother. Good meeting you. Mike, like I said, that the Fieldcraft stuff and the horses a little bit more experience, some stuff in the SEAL teams, but I wouldn't consider the Fieldcraft stuff my strong suit, but I'm absolutely intrigued by it and learning more and more as we go. So I'd love to bring some guys out your way to one of your classes. We do special events quarterly, And sometimes, they've been out of town, but usually not out of state. We were planning one pre-COVID down in Florida with one of our guys that moved down there, but it didn't work out due to the COVID mess or something. But it'd be very cool to catch up with you. And as BK said, we got 2 locations. One, we have a shoot house here and all that stuff. Would look very, very familiar when you look at the tactics kind of scaled for civilian works. But it's amazing what these what our students have kind of accomplished. Same thing that we've kind of been saying is that it's amazing that I can't even, it's crazy the similarities even you were talking about, like as far as a businessman. I've got amazing mentors that help me with that stuff. One of the best compliments I've ever got from Pankham the Sage we call him the Sage, is he's like, go be you. I'll take care of this stuff. You go be you. And it was one of the most liberating, freeing, just cool things. I was like, go, dude, I bet I got. And I'll just go out and do my stuff, and they just somehow make all the numbers work. So I really appreciate that and share that with you as well. But guys, thank you very much. Appreciate all of this. Please support the American Contingency. Check out Fieldcraft Survival. Support Mike and his guys. There's likenesses here. We'll see these guys again, and I look forward to working with them again as well. If you're a vet and you're hearing this, then just please, I just hope and pray that you would find your mission again. And if you need my help, reach out and we'll see if we can't support you. If you're on that same vision, man, there's no reason why we wouldn't. So let's talk about that. And the nation needs us. Like if you're a young man going into service, young man or woman, young lady going into service, thank you so much. It's just after Veterans Day as we're recording this thing. We desperately need you. If you are not considering service, we desperately need you. We need leaders to step up. And if you just you haven't grown into that leadership position right now, support somebody. Find somebody that's doing something, start following, and who knows, maybe you'll take the reins from them someday. So appreciate it, guys. Have a great week. We'll see you soon until we catch you on the next podcast. God bless you guys. Take care of one another.